Hello, in this video we are going to talk about how to successfully complete a portrait in watercolors. I was in the mood for watercolors after working with oils for a little while. In my mind they're kind of like the opposite, so I was just craving the more refreshing medium and thought, you know what, I can probably make a video out of this, and so I filmed myself. My personal goal for these studies was to focus on value, and we're going to talk about it. So I reference this color harmony book a lot because the colors weren't as important to me this time, but my focus was values, so it didn't matter the color as long as the values were correct. So I often referenced this book to help choose my color palette, and I used a variety of brushes, a number 10 round brush, a number 4 round brush, I think a number 2 round brush, and a number 2 flat for details were the materials I use. And then my watercolors, I mostly have Daniel Smith watercolors. They come in like some value sets, and then I got a couple on clearance, and I have a couple, I think Winsor & Newton watercolors in there. But yes, those are my watercolors. Those are the materials I used in this video. And then the paper that I used was Arch's hot pressed watercolor paper. When it comes to watercolor, paper is super important, so I recommend an artist grade or a student grade watercolor paper. Okay, the next thing you're going to want to do is choose your references. I got mine from Pinterest. There's probably better places where you could get your references, but I got mine from Pinterest. I downloaded them and turned them black and white so that I could better see the values. I was mainly looking for a highlight, a midtone, and a dark. Those were the 3 values I was looking for, and in case the term value is new to you, all it means is how light or dark a color is. So in this case, you can clearly see the highlight, the midtone, and the dark, and those were the values that I was mainly keeping my eye on. While I was studying these watercolor portraits, I used a 0.5 mechanical pencil to block in the big shapes as I was drawing. I didn't want to do too many details or anything because I wanted to let the watercolor do its thing, and you know, we just don't need the details right now. So when I was drawing, my main focus was big shapes. Okay, we're kind of jumping right into it. So as you can see, I'm referencing that book that I told you about earlier, the Color Harmony book, and I chose for this portrait a purpley color for the shadows, and you'll see a yellow for kind of just to change the temperature a little bit, and for like the plane shifts of the face. And there's a couple different techniques with watercolor, and here I'm doing wet and on dry. That's kind of how you start, I guess, or how I start personally. And I'm diluting the purple color with quite a bit of water because I want that first layer to be fairly translucent. I'm also kind of going back and forth and dabbing some water onto a little towel that's next to me, just to better control the watercolor. Now, I do want to say watercolor is not the medium if you want maximum control. You kind of have to let watercolor do its thing. You know, you want a little control, of course, because otherwise, like, what's the point, I guess, or maybe, I don't know. But watercolor likes to do its thing. It likes to sprawl out, make cool effects, so you kind of have to let it. I am also making sure to keep the white of the paper white because once you put pigment on there, you can't really get it back unless you do another technique called scrubbing, which is where you kind of try and scrub the pigment off with your brush. But I do want to keep that white of the paper for the highlights. And yeah, in this beginning stage of the portrait, I am just being super mindful of the highlights and the shadows. I'm using my biggest brush to get a wash, a bigger wash, because I'm not trying to do details yet. And yeah. Right, so the first technique with watercolors that I already talked about a little was wet on dry. This technique is really good for layering, it's good for structure and definition. Now you're seeing I'm bringing in another color. I'm kind of now trying to build the mid-tone value. I could just go in with a mid-tone, but I just wanted to go really slow and get things right, and so I chose to build and layer. And yeah, if there's one thing about me is I take my sweet time. So yeah, I'm going slow, I'm building, layering, taking my time, having patience, process over product, okay? At this point, the watercolor layers that I put on dried, and you can see the cool effect that it gave. And this is like kind of what I mean about letting watercolor do its thing. I put the colors and the layers in specific areas, but it just kind of sprawled out and did what it wanted to do, and I let it. So yeah. You also can kind of see that I really built up that mid-tone, and I feel like the mid-tone value at this point is now pretty clear. And the next thing I'm going to do is bring in the dark, because that is what I'm ready for at this stage. And in a minute here, you'll see that my camera goes out of focus, and I left that in intentionally because I wanted to share a little trick with you. Oftentimes when I am looking at my reference, I will unfocus my eyes to purposely blur the image, and that helps me see where okay, move your head, okay. And that helps me see where the lights and the darks and the midtones are without the details getting in the way or getting distracted by the details. I hope that makes sense. I think it does. And you might be able to hear my dog crying in the background. Sorry about that. And and yeah, so here I'm just blocking in the dark tones, unfocusing my eyes to look at the values from my reference. If you don't know how to unfocus your eyes, you can just squint your eyes. If you wear glasses, take your glasses off, I guess. I don't know. Or you can put it in digitally and blur the image that way. That's just what I like to do to better see values and stuff. Now let's talk about the wet on wet technique with watercolors. Basically, it's where you add wet pigment onto wet pigment or water, or basically what I'm doing here with the hair. You'll see when I do the girl next to her, I'll do green for the shadows on red, and that will show a really cool wet on wet effect. But you can kind of see it here, and all it means is we're just adding wet on wet, and it's really good for soft plane shifts, or if you wanted to subtly add a little bit darker of a value, and for cool effects. Really, it's kind of cool. Okay, now that I've blocked in the main values, the highlight, the midtone, the dark, I am now ready to add definition to the face, to sculpt the face a little bit, and do all those things, do the fun details and stuff. So this is where I bring in my little flat brush. I found that this brush kind of worked best for what I needed here, and yeah. I'm now going to just speed up these clips just so the video isn't super long and boring, but I also didn't want to leave anything out so you could see the whole process for this portrait in case you are someone who just learns by watching like I am. So yes, but just keep in mind this is sped up these next couple clips. I'm still going slow, and yeah. I just wanted to point out another technique that I noticed I was using a lot, which is called glazing. Basically, glazing is a painting technique that involves applying a transparent layer of paint over a dried layer of paint. And you can use it with a lot of mediums. I know I use it with oil all the time. But basically, it helps to create a sense of color, depth, luminosity. And I use it a lot for these portraits to bring out form, mostly the form of the face and features. this is me showing you my chai latte. I'm really into chai lattes right now because I stopped drinking coffee like a year ago now. Wow, crazy, time flies. And so ever since then, I'm into chai lattes now. So, but actually, I've since found a better recipe, and that one's not as good. Just saying. Also, in this portrait, I lost some of my drawing a little bit, so I'm coming back in with my mechanical pencil to just redraw some of the features so I can see it better as I'm painting. Okay, jumping back in to say this is a much better example of a wet on wet technique. Before putting in the pigment for the hair on this shape, this spot of the drawing, I laid down a clear wash of water and then I put in the red pigment, and you saw that it kind of did its thing, and I added in some green where the shadows are, and it gives this really cool wet on wet effect. I worked on these two portraits back and forth in tandem because I kind of had to wait for a couple layers to dry before I could move on. So I kind of would work on one of the portraits, let whatever I needed to let dry, and then go on to the next, and I did that back and forth. And that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching me paint with watercolors and study portraits with watercolors. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, let me know down below. I'll answer them to the best of my ability, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye!